I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time when I'm doing my power rankings here, explaining it. I'm kind of just going to explain, like, I guess how their season has gone so far, what's happened, and I mean, maybe go into, like, why I don't think that they're, that great of a team. But to start things out here at number 32, I am going to say the Texans. I think that the Texans are one of those that, they don't have that much talent. They obviously gave up, Deshaun Watson in the offseason. And, I mean, while they tied the Colts week 1, that really didn't prove on anything, I guess, seeing as the Colts got, swept week 2. And then they did beat the Chiefs, this past week. But it's like you really, I guess, can't really say too much. The Texans competed with the Bears this past week. It was the Bears, and I guess that's another thing is that, like, I mean, the Bears aren't very good. I mean, they pulled out a week 1 win. And I guess I don't quite remember who the Texans played week 2, but they lost that game, and it's like this is a team that obviously they're not putting up a ton of points. They are giving up more, 10, I guess a negative of 10, which isn't, too big of a difference, but it's like three games in, and I mean you've only scored 7 touchdowns. That's really not a winning formula in today's league unless you have, a top defense in the league. So it's like the Texans, a long way to go. That's why they're going to be 32. At 31, thinking about this, I guess we kind of have some, teams that we could go with that aren't, doing very well this year. I personally would like to say that, for number 31, that we're probably looking at, in all honesty, we're probably haven't really thought about this too much, so that's why I'm kind of thinking about it. But it's like, looking at this, I think we're looking at the Seahawks. While the Seahawks, While the Seahawks week 1, did an upset over the Broncos this year aren't looking, their offense is definitely really struggling, to do anything. And that just, the Seahawks, to me, it's like they haven't been able to get their offense going or anything like that. And I mean, they have one of the better, I think, wide receiver tandems with Lockett and Metcalf. It's like either, that tandem, it's in and of itself, you'd think both of those guys should be able to put up like 100 yards a week, if not more. And I mean, Geno Smith hasn't even been playing that bad. But then the other thing that I think about with the Seahawks is that, like, their defense is just, they just don't really have, a defense or really anything to, sing home to on defense anymore. I mean, I'm trying to actually think of any players that they have that are noteworthy. I guess they have, they have Brooks, who's an aspiring young, linebacker, Jordan Brooks. But I mean, other than that, they really don't have that any pieces anymore that are like super intriguing to me on defense. And I mean, this team, should be being led by their offense. But but their defense is, not doing so well. But their offense, even worse. 70 points in 3 weeks. I mean, you're talking about, giving up, 23 points or so a game. And then, you've only scored, kind of in the same boat as the Texans. You really haven't scored that much, over the first, few weeks of the season. So the Seahawks, really, I think that this is kind of a surprise just because a Pete Carroll-led team. And, Geno's not playing bad. It's not like they're losing games because of bad play. They're just underperforming, in my opinion. At number 30, I guess the next team that I would like to say is the Jets. The Jets with that crazy game over the where they came back and they had 2 touchdowns late in the game. I can't remember who, but Joe Flacco, has been looking, not even that bad, and he's putting up really good yards. Like, I think through 3 weeks, he's actually top 5 for yards in the league as a QB. And if you had told me this before the season, I would have called you crazy. But Joe Flacco is actually doing pretty well. Some mistakes here and there. I guess he could have kind of expected to be the starter after the Zach Wilson thing, and they're playing it safe with him. But overall, doing pretty well for not having started for however many years, and he's pretty old and immobile, but he's doing pretty well to make this team win. The thing that I think that holds this team back is that they don't really have that much of a defense, and obviously their offensive line is really, really banged up. But I guess moving on from them, I'm gonna put my I'm going to talk the next team that I would like, to, put on here that I think is, probably also kind of, well, maybe not even underperforming is the Patriots. I think the Patriots at 29, they seem like a team that Mac Jones, he does some good things, but then he also makes some, poor decision throws, and they don't really have a run game from what I've seen, in their games and that sort of thing. And it's like, what happened since last year? Because last year is what, was actually, doing well on that team. Was the run game, and that was why Mac Jones, was able to play more of a system role and that sort of thing. And I guess giving him more throws, it will, develop him faster. And him making risks is he'll learn off of it. But I don't think that he's a QB that's going to ever eventually be the guy. I think he's one of those that he can be a glorified game manager. And, he makes some good throws. And, he has to cut back on his mistakes because a couple, a few interceptions this year that I've seen just really kind of forced throws. But otherwise, the other thing, too, is I guess, his only reliable target, I guess, is like Nelson Aguilar. And Aguilar's been playing, lights out there because I think he's trying to prove that he can still be, a very reliable wide receiver since leaving the Raiders. But otherwise, the Patriots, Mac Jones being somewhat injured now, having a high ankle sprain, he's probably set to miss time. It's one of those things that it's like I'm expecting them to, lose this week, and not just because they're up against, I guess, my Packers or anything like that, but it's, even if he plays, an immobile man like him, he does scramble from time to time and has a little bit of escapability, but it's like with a high ankle sprain, he's just going to be a sitting duck out there, and he's definitely, far from, quick, even fully healthy. So with a high ankle sprain, it's just, going to hinder him, and it's hard to play, too, off of, an ankle injury, when you have to plant your feet, and it's hard to, go full strength with the ball if, you have an ankle sprain that, is affecting your throwing motion. But the Patriots, and they're definitely lacking a lot of pieces. The defense isn't playing terrible, but they're really missing a good amount of pieces. So moving on to 28, I would like to say, I guess, the Steelers. I really haven't been, at all happy with how the Steelers have been playing this year. They seem kind of rejuvenated with Trubisky week 1, but now, week 2 and week 3, he's made some bad throws, bad turnovers, and that sort of thing. They say they're not going to start the rookie at all, but I say, why not? I mean, it doesn't seem like Trubisky is really doing that much. I mean, he makes some good throws here and there, but it's like they, ever since beating, Cincinnati, they really haven't done anything, since the first game of the season. And I mean, this is another team, it's like they've already given up, 66 points within, 3 weeks. So it's like they're giving up, quite a bit of points. And I mean, really, I think that their offense is just overall underperforming. I mean, they have good pieces. They just, some of them that come to mind are like Chase Claypool. Like, he's really not done that much this year after saying he was a top wide receiver in the offseason and that sort of thing. And I mean, it's baffling to me because last year, I mean, when they were playing, these guys were getting open, but Big Ben was just missing throws, and it's like, what is happening? They have, I mean, the other thing too is that their defense is, pretty good, even with the TJ Watt injury. I mean, they've been, playing decently, but it's huge to lose a top 5 guy like that. So that's why the Steelers are here at 28. So moving on, I'd like to, I guess, list, the Falcons here at the next spot. I think the Falcons, while they've been close in their games, and obviously with, 80 points scored, 81 points against, it just seems to me like they don't have a defense at all. Because I mean, they are, top 5, I think it is, or at least, or top 7 with how many points they've given up. And it's one of those things of why they haven't been able to win a game up until this last week, where they won their game. I got to look at the scores here. I'm trying to remember who they beat. I think it was, I know it was a close game, but it's they beat the Seahawks. But it was just one of those things that for the Falcons, I mean, they really benefited, I guess, from a Seahawks team that, is struggling to find offense, but was able to put up 23 this last game. But yeah, I really, to me, the Falcons, I mean, they have Olave who's doing, really well. And he's definitely proven that he was worth the pick and that sort of thing. But I guess the Falcons, I mean, they seem to be doing better with Mariota, but it's one of those things that I don't think they have what it takes to win, just because their defense is not that great and they're giving up way too many points. And I mean, their offense, can score, but it's a relatively new offense. It's a relatively young offense. And I mean, I don't think Mariota's a bad quarterback by any means, but they just, I mean, their defense is just holding them back, is what my opinion is for them. Following the Falcons, I would like to say, and I mean, I guess, kind of a big surprise here, I would like to say, the Bears, are definitely the next, team on here. The Bears, what do I have to say about them? Week 1, they won a game in literally a monsoon, I guess, against the Niners. But since then, I mean, they were pretty handled by the Packers. Could have easily been a shutout if the Packers defense had played the way they did all game. Since they had scored a touchdown, and they definitely, I mean, they could have dominated performance. But then this last week, the Bears, they won, but they barely beat, the Texans. And the Texans, I mean, aren't by any means like a team to sing home about. And I mean, this was one of those things that it's like the Bears clinched their victory off of a defensive interception by Roquan Smith. So the Bears, to me, I mean, and Justin Fields, I mean, doing some good things, but also kind of forcing it. I remember one of the plays he made in this last game was that he really just forced a ball into triple coverage to Darnell Mooney, and it's like that's one of those things that's like, yeah, sure, he's your guy, that he's your stud, and you need to try and be getting him the ball, but you can't be forcing it to him. And I mean, that's just gonna really, it's gonna create a rift, between Mooney. I don't know, he's probably not a hothead type player, but it's like, I mean, he seems humble, but you can't keep forcing balls to him, or you're just going to kind of ruin that relationship, because no wide receiver is going to want to be forced off the field because your QB is going to, just blindly throw it to you just because he wants to get you the ball. But I think there's been too many of those picks, honestly, by Fields this year. So that's why I'm putting the Bears at 26. Following that, some other, low-ranking teams that I guess haven't been performing that much. I'm going to put the Panthers. The Panthers, I think, while, they've had growing pains with Baker, the defense has been playing, pretty well. But their shortcomings to me lie with the offense, which is kind of asinine considering that McCaffrey hasn't gotten hurt this year. He had, a lingering injury. But it didn't cost him any playing time. And then you got guys like DJ Moore on the offense, who's, a pretty reliable wide receiver. You got Roby, is that? You got Laviska Shenault. That's who I'm thinking of. Laviska Shenault has looked, rejuvenated. And not that he's been in the league very long, but he had some plays where, I mean, he, ran and showed some good yards after the catch ability, good hands. Overall is definitely overperforming than from his time on the Jaguars, which must have just not been a good fit for him in my eyes. But the Panthers have, a pretty good, wide receiver room that's, I guess, a little underrated, I would say. I mean, they need some time to, I guess, kind of prove that they're legit type of thing. But overall, I think that, Baker and the offense are just going to get, they're going to get better together. And the defense has definitely been performing pretty well. They're 1-2, but I really think that their record, isn't representative of their skill. They played, the Browns almost, eye for eye, week 1, where they had a shot to win that game. And I think this past week, I didn't mean to do that. I think this past week, the Panthers, I mean, they beat the Saints, and the Saints aren't any team that are, pushover. Granted, they've lost their last 2 games. They lost to the the Buccaneers last week, where they just kind of had a collapse late in the game. And I mean, there was the fight, but it's like, I don't really think that affected the outcome of the game. I think it was just one of those that, Winston started giving the ball up, and it just really wasn't that good. It just wasn't a good performance from Jameis either, and I mean, he was playing, somewhat hurt, but it's just one of those things that, the Panthers, I think, they're young, they're getting better, and they're not jumping off the grid by any means like some of these other young teams, but they're getting better, and they finally have a quarterback that isn't just outright bad, I guess, like Sam Darnold, playing QB for them, who, just would never bring any results you would want to see. So that's why I'm putting the Panthers there. The Saints, I am going to put above them, even though that they beat them. And the main reason for that is because I think the Saints still have a very, very good defense. It's just their offense that is seemingly struggling, which is kind of crazy considering Mike Thomas has been healthy. They signed Jarvis Landry, and then they drafted I always forget his name, to be honest with you. I can't remember the guy's name that they drafted, but he was like the most pro ready, I guess, rookie or something like that. I guess he didn't even have, a receiver here. Even Adam Trotman, is not that bad of a tight end. But let me look this up. Chris Olave is who it is. Oh, wait. So I mentioned Olave with... Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember Olave with the Falcons. I'm totally mixing up the rookies here. I feel bad for saying that, but it's like, no, the Falcons rookie is doing well, and so is Olave, and it's one of those things that it's like they have such a talented group with Kamara, even though Kamara's been, kind of banged up. But the Saints, to me, still have a very good defense. They went up against, the Bucs and limited the Bucs, offense to very, very, few points, where it's like they were only able to, get the lead late in the fourth quarter, when they played them. But overall, still a very good defense, I think. And they were even getting, under, Tom Brady's skin and, Mike Evans' skin, obviously, and just a lot of agitation when playing the Saints, because they get pressure. They force turnovers, and they're just a very good defensive unit. And if the offense, ever picks up, the Saints are kind of, even though I'm ranking them low at this point because their offense is just struggling, I think that the Saints are kind of a dark horse to, be a riser on, power rankings and that sort of thing. So that's why I'm putting the Saints at 24 right now, because they're just, their offense just isn't performing. Next, I want to put a team here that I think, a lot of people are kind of shocked about, but they're kind of falling in the same boat as the Saints in a sense. But I'm going to put the Raiders here at 23, because while, they acquired Devontae Adams, they have Waller at tight end, who's been doing well, and they've had some other wide receivers whom I don't even know the names of. I'm trying to remember the guy from the last game that they played here against the Titans, who he was doing really well for receiving. Mac Hollins. This guy was playing out of his mind, obviously, in this last game. And it's kind of one of those crazy things that it's like he performed, better than Devontae Adams, obviously, and performed better than the rest of the team. And even Foster Moreau, getting some action in on this game. But the main problem I see with the Raiders, I guess, is that they cannot close out games. And for whatever reason, their offense isn't scoring as efficiently as you would think. With all the players that they have, you'd think with, Waller and Devontae, they'd be able to score at will. Even Josh Jacobs, running. This week he did, relatively well, but I guess they're just, to me, they're throwing the ball way too much. And I don't know if they're just, other weeks they just haven't had that many rushing yards, but it's like they aren't really using Jacobs, I guess, to his capability, in my opinion. And it's just, it's kind of hurting them. They're 0-3, but obviously they've been able to, score, 64 points, which I guess isn't crazy, obviously, because it's only like averaging 21 points, some per game. But their defense is, I've seen some good things from Crosby where he's forcing fumbles and they're getting pressure, but they're just not able to close games. And I don't know what the reason is for that. I mean, maybe they're on the field too long or something like that, but their offense is kind of underperforming, I think, with, that amount of talent that they have. I just think that they should be putting up more points, and they definitely should not be 0-3. But otherwise, I mean, I guess, if you can't close out games, I mean, you probably should be ranked the worst, but I think that with the talent they have, you just can't do that. Yeah, but moving on to I guess my next team, I want to talk about the Commanders. I think that the Commanders have done some good things, and I think Wentz has somewhat revitalized his career somewhat. I don't think that he's completely resurrected it. I think that they need to, have a bit more consistency, because 49 points isn't a lot. 63 isn't a lot. I'm looking at the wrong line, but the defense, I guess, overall, isn't. They're getting pressure, and they've had some good, splash plays, but they seemingly are giving up a lot on defense, because I just think that it's because their pass rush isn't as good. Chase Young, I don't think, has played this year, but otherwise their offense with, Curtis Samuel's been playing well, Scary Terry, even their run game, and I guess, Wentz, has had some escapability, and I mean, he hasn't been, I guess, throwing these really dumb, daffy interceptions like he was last year, where he just cost games for the Colts. So, I mean, the Commanders, I think, they've been doing well, but it's kind of funny. But the next team that I'm going to put up here is the Titans. The Titans, I think, the Titans came up. Didn't they come up with, an upset over somebody, I think, this week? Or am I tripping? Or no, they beat the Raiders. That's right. They were barely able to eke out a win over the Raiders. I think that Tannehill isn't playing terribly, but I think that the lack of talent on this team means that Henry's been suffering a lot. I don't think that he's really having the year, that he's been having the last 2 years, where nobody's really going to be talking about, Henry for MVP like they did, the last, year or 2 years. So it's just one of those things that, to me, with the Titans, they haven't. I mean, they just haven't really done that much this year. I mean, it's kind of crazy to imagine that's like this team was so good, but it's like then they get rid of Brown to the Eagles, and it's just like everything starts falling apart. Like they don't have really any weapons on offense. I mean, I would be hard pressed to say what weapons they have, to be honest, besides Henry, but it's like you can't get it done with just a running back. Like it's just kind of been, proven in the past that it's like you can't get it done with just a running back on numerous teams. But I guess, moving on from the Titans, another team, I wouldn't think that I would rank this low, but I'm going to put the Colts up here. The Colts, tied week 1 against the Texans. Week 2, they get shut out by the Jaguars, which, to me, I mean, it might just be one of those like matchup diffs or something like that, because to be honest with you, the Jaguars have seemingly had the Colts number since the last game of last year. And I mean, it's just like maybe they're in their head or something, but I mean, the Jaguars to me are an up and coming team, and they've been proven it this year that they're definitely like, somewhat legitimate, still young, but the Colts, I mean, it seems like they've taken a step back. I mean, even though they got a quarterback that, is going to be more protecting of the ball in Ryan over the Wentz, even though Wentz, is playing, if Wentz had played how he played this year last year, I don't think the Colts would have lost, the game to the Jaguars. But it's kind of odd what's happened to the Colts because they got, two of the best guards in the league. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Jonathan Taylor, I think this last week, didn't even have, that great of a game. But they were able to win. They were able to, do some things. Not a whole lot. Like, I don't think anybody on their team had an insane game, but they managed to win against the Raiders, who, like I said, they just seem to struggle against, on defense. They give up too many points. Even though, I mean, they have some, good things happen. But otherwise, that's where I'm putting the Colts. Otherwise, moving on, I'm trying to think of who I want to put here. I guess we've nailed most of these. I guess the team, I'll put up next is I'm going to put the 49ers here. The 49ers, to me, it's like Lance definitely didn't look very good week 1, but, I mean, he didn't look bad. It doesn't it's one of those that it's like it's hard to tell in a game where it's a monsoon and whatever else, and the weather is just plays such a heavy part. And those games are, one of those that are hard to predict, too, because you don't know how, some players, it doesn't affect them, and some players, they play better, but some, I mean, it makes them worse because they're just not used to it. But, the Niners this past week, they lost to the Broncos. The Broncos with a, kind of crazy, I guess, end of the game, thing. But it's like Jimmy G at quarterback. He's not playing terribly. I mean, some of the throws he makes are, kind of like toss-ups, if you will. And, I mean, he has thrown some picks, but it's one of those things to me that, I mean, the offense itself, like their run game is, pretty horrendous on the Niners. So it's like they're forced to throw a lot. But then that defense, I mean, the defense has been, performing, able to get pressure, and that sort of thing. But you're just not able to win games if you're not able to score. And you'd think with, I mean, Ayuk and Deebo Samuel coming along that it would be one of those things that they would be able to, do well. But that's just not the case. The Niners, it kind of baffles me, like, why they're, doing so bad. I feel like they should be 2-1 because they definitely should have beat the Bears. But I mean, the weather, I guess, really kind of screwed them week 1. But otherwise, I guess, I don't really have too much to say about the Niners. It just seems like they're kind of getting used to themselves, which is strange considering they have, a vastly similar team that they've had in the past. I guess Kittle got his first game action this weekend, but otherwise, the Niners just, I feel like, underperforming, to be honest with you. And especially in, like, the division that they're in, where the Rams, everyone going into the season, like, the Rams, are one of the top 5 teams in the league. They're kind of, they're not really playing, crazy football either. And then, I mean, the Cardinals you got, they've been really kind of sputtering, signs of life and all of that, but then, but the division that they're in, really not that tough, I feel like, this year. And, the Seahawks, one of the worst teams in the league, in my opinion, but, not in the way that they're performing. But, yeah, Niners at 19. Moving on, already done the Jets, already done, the Saints, Patriots. I guess moving on from there, I would I would honestly say, gosh, I mean, I guess to me, it's just one of those things of like, what team, I mean, is getting kind of fluky at this point. That, like, probably shouldn't be there, to be honest with you, because I think a lot of these teams that are lower are bad, but I guess, at this point, I'm actually going to put the Chargers. The Chargers, interesting enough to me, like, should have been the challenger for the Chiefs in that division. But this last week, they lost their left tackle to I think it was like a bicep rupture or something. They lost Slater, which was, one of the premier young left tackles in the league, to protect Herbert. And it's never easy to lose a guy like that. Like, I know from, experience of watching the Packers without David Bakhtiari for the last, he hasn't really played, since 2020. He played like, a few snaps last year. But it's tough without, an all-pro left tackle to protect your quarterback's blind side. And, I mean, it makes it harder to run. It makes it harder to do just pretty much everything on offense. I mean, I think it's, definitely a top five position in football where, you want to have good linemen. Because if you have a really good O-line, I mean, your team typically just performs better. But the Chargers, I mean, last week they put up a really good fight against, the Chiefs. But, I mean, after this week, and after seeing the Chiefs, struggle and lose their game, I really don't want to even think that the Chiefs, are one of those teams that are just, bona fide, unstoppable and that sort of thing. And then the Chargers, doing practically nothing this week. I mean, it was a tough week against Jacksonville, and Jacksonville, I mean, I guess, is kind of proving that they're, possibly legitimate this year, where they're ready to go and just, ready to beat anyone they play. Even though I don't think that they've played a true challenge, but I mean, you could say that the Chargers, are a true challenge, because it's like they have one of the best, young QBs in the league, and you're talking about, guys that performed well against the they perform well against, the Chiefs. And I mean, it's just, I don't know, this season is kind of mind-boggling. I feel like, doing this tier list, I feel like, there's always, some controversy with this type of thing, I guess I'd mention at this point, but it's tough to rank these teams based off of what has happened, because of how, I guess, random and bizarre the games have been this season. I mean, there's only like a few teams I would, be bona fide to rank, at the top five, but these middle tiers are kind of, it's one of those things that I just, and even, I mean, I guess that goes to show with the next team that I'm going to rank. I'm ranking the Giants actually or am I ranking the Giants here? I want to rank the Giants here, but I don't think, I mean, are they, compared to the rest of these teams, who do I rank? I guess, I'm honestly going to rank, the Bengals actually at this next spot. Because while the Bengals, have a really, really solid, I guess, they have a really solid, wide receiver core and solid running back, their O-line is just really horrendous. And, I mean, it seems to me like, I mean, Burrow still is making the throws, but he's getting hit as he's, thrown. It's like, or as he throws, and it's kind of a mess there. And I mean, but their defense is being, pretty opportunistic and that sort of thing. So it's like, I mean, they've only given up, 55 points in 3 games. It isn't the best, but it isn't, terrible. I think that for the Bengals, it really, their O-line is probably what's going to hold them back. And like I was just saying, I mean, O-lines in the NFL are one of those things that, like, if you have a really bad O-line, you can have, all pros at every other position, but it's like if your QB doesn't have time to ever get rid of the ball, then it doesn't really matter, how many skill position players you have that are, potential that are potential Pro Bowlers and that sort of thing. I mean, and I think that's just becoming evident. I mean, Burrow, he throws a beautiful ball under duress. Like, I don't think it affects him that much, but it's like he can't keep getting hit, and he's been sacked, I think, the most this year, and hit and rushed and all of that stuff. So, I mean, the Bengals, to me, it's just, last year, I don't want to say it was a fluke, but it's like it was one of those things where they barely were, winning these playoff games. And that's why it always came down to McPherson in the postseason. And it's one of those things this year that, I mean, they're putting up points, but, really only to win one game so far. They got beat by the Steelers, who, I ranked obviously lower than them, but I still think that they're just better personnel-wise, and, I mean, I just think that they can, definitely get better as the season goes on. They just need to figure out their O-line, really. But I guess moving on from that, I want to say, I guess the next team that I want to put on here, I guess, is the Broncos. The Broncos, to me, have a really, they have a good defense. Their defense is doing really well for them. But for whatever reason, their offense, I mean, even though they've got the guy, Russell Wilson, that everyone was like, oh, let's talk about how we have Russell Wilson now in the offseason. And it's like, everyone's, I mean, I guess, people are attacking Wilson, people are attacking Nathaniel Hackett, the new head coach. And, I mean, it's just one of those things that for the Broncos, I mean, they really just need to click on offense. Because, I mean, as you can see right here, it's like they've only given up 36 points, in 3 weeks. And, I mean, granted, they have 2 wins. But to be honest with you, this team should be 3-0. There is no reason why they should have lost against the Seahawks week 1. And it's like, I mean, it comes down to the 2, fumbles at the 1 yard line that they had week 1. And it's just like their offense just isn't performing. And it's like, you think about it, I mean, this last week they beat the Niners, 11-10. It's like, I mean, you barely beat, the Niners. So it's like, you should definitely be able to put up, more than 11 points against the Niners because you have a pretty good O-line, but you just can't execute on offense. And, I mean, only 43 points, 3 weeks in, like, that's abysmal points per week. And obviously it's like they had, more points average the first, 2 weeks than they did this last week. And it's like their defense, I mean, your defense isn't going to be able to play like that all season. I think we've seen it in the past where it's like even the Bears, years ago, they were the defense was just absolutely tearing it up, and they had really not an offense. I think it was the year that they signed the Khalil Mack or whatever else, that the defense was just winning them games because of how, pressure oriented and how, good they were at stopping teams on offense. Because it's like if a team can't move on offense, they're just not going to win games. But it's like that, it's one of those things that, I mean, you can't rely on your defense the entire year. Eventually you got to score points. And that's, I mean, the Broncos' low scoring, like, I don't even know. It's, obviously bottom 2 in the league, which just isn't good, and I don't like at all. But moving on from the Broncos, I want to go and I want to say that the next team that I guess, that I want to put here is I want to put the, let me fix this. I want to put the Cowboys, just because, the Cowboys, kind of crazy, but they've won 2 games now back to back with a backup QB, with Rush. And it's, I mean, I didn't think that I would be putting these guys here, or even like this high, because personally to me, I think that the Cowboys, for all the hype and for all the talk around them, I think that they really should be doing better. I mean, with the amount that they're paying Zeke, this year, and it's like this guy. I mean, I really think that they should have, cut him. They should have cut him or made him restructure his deal because he's really not doing that well. Uh, it's crazy to me, I guess, the Cowboys and that sort of thing, what they're doing. And I mean, Rush is, playing well for a backup, and it's like, as a Cowboys fan, you should probably be happy because it's like, I mean, week one, they obviously lose to the Buccaneers because Dak gets knocked out early. And I mean, there's really no coming back from that week one. And especially against, you're up against one of the better teams in the league and the Buccaneers, who obviously have, a good amount of talent. Tom Brady, and their defense, I mean, this year is, showing that it's still really good. And I mean, that they're ready to play and ready to bring it home. But the Cowboys, to me, underperforming. I mean, they were ready to go all in on these wide receivers and, even get rid of Amari Cooper for practically nothing. And to me, it's like, I mean, you should definitely be performing better, even with a quarterback like Rush. But I don't even think Rush is that bad. I mean, just from the games that I've seen, that he's been playing in, I mean, I think that he's definitely like a serviceable QB, and it's like give him somewhat of a balanced, offense, and he's not that bad. But moving on from there, trying to think about this, I actually want to put. I think we've went through all of these bottom teams here already. So I think that it's, one of those things that we're moving up. It's really interesting to me, looking at these. The Cardinals, I'm actually going to put up here. The Cardinals, to me, even this last week against their division rival with the Rams, the only problem that they seemed to have was that they could not get a touchdown. Hollywood Brown, lighting up the Rams. Honestly, to me, it's like I've been saying this for a long time. I think Ramsey is kind of overrated. He had a big tackle and that sort of thing, and he did a couple of things in that game, but it's like, I think that Ramsey, honestly, was kind of giving up, quite a bit, to be honest with you, when he was on Brown. And then it's like, I mean, he only had a couple of plays. But, I mean, you got Murray, who's playing, pretty well. And with a guy like him, he's shifty. And he's making his opportunities, pretty accurate and, throws it effortlessly. But the thing to me with the Cardinals, I guess, that is kind of a bummer is that their defense is just not that good. They're getting better, I think. I think it's one of those things that, week one, I mean, Isaiah Simmons has been having, a rocky time for a while now, but even he, made some impact plays on their game that they won. That was in overtime. But obviously they're giving up, 87 points in 3 weeks is definitely not ideal. It seems really bad, actually. Yeah, it's, bottom 2 in the league. But, yeah, you're talking about a team that I think, once D-Hop gets back, I mean, yeah, there'll be some magic. And, I mean, maybe their offense will be a little bit more balanced and they'll be able to run the ball better. But right now, I think that their run game is really, I guess, kind of failing because that's like, to be honest with you, James Conner, it's like that was the strength or somewhat of a strength of their offense last year. And they didn't have to completely rely on Kyler. But now, I mean, and they've had, a pretty tough schedule this year. I'm pretty sure, going into the season, if you looked at their opponents, they had the hardest win percentage of all the teams that they played this year, which, I mean, we can kind of throw that out of the window probably just because a lot of the teams that were, good last year, are seemingly failing or whatever, but which is, I mean, it's just kind of odd this year. This year has been an odd year. But the Cardinals, I think they have the pieces that they need to like even be a high scoring offense. And I mean, if their defense can be opportunistic, then, come playoff time, they might become like a dangerous team. And especially when D-Hop comes back, because that just makes their offense, more dynamic. And with a guy like him, and I mean, that he's just going to be chomping at the bit to play, once he's back. But they just need to be able to win, a few more games before then. And I think that they're golden to try and make a playoff run because, I mean, their division to me, like the Rams are definitely, the number one team right now. But it's like even the Rams, I mean, they haven't looked, great this year. I mean, granted, they played, the Bills week 1, which just, lit them up and they just looked, out of sorts. But the Rams are definitely one of those teams that I think, is definitely going to be there in the postseason. And, to be honest with you, I'm actually going to be ranking the Rams next on this list. Mainly because I think that even in their last game this week, the Rams, against the Cardinals, like I said, the Cardinals only really lost this game because they could not score a touchdown. 4 field goals. They were, driving, a lot during the game. The Rams, to me, the only reason that they won was because of the 14-point swing that, they got off of the Cooper Kupp rushing touchdown. Where he rushed, I think it was like 20 yards, and the team was just, I mean, the defense was just completely, and they just completely blew the coverage. Like Cooper Kupp didn't even have to, put a move on him. He just ran, around the whole defense like a blown assignment or something. It's like there has to be an outside cover guy for things like that. And they weren't even, it's not like they were close to the goal line. And then I guess the other one, it was Cam Akers. Cam Akers, I'm pretty sure, was the one that, ran the other one. And I mean, even he didn't even have a marvelous game or anything like that, but it's one of those things that, like, this team, I think, is underperforming because no wide receiver over 100 yards. You have Stafford, throwing 25, balls for 250 yards, 18 completions, which, I mean, isn't terrible, but it's like you kind of expect more from a franchise QB like that. And then this guy, Skowronek, doing the best on your team next to Higbee. And then the reigning Triple Crown champion of last year, Cooper Kupp, not doing too much. So it's, I mean, to me, the Rams, I mean, are very underperforming. I don't even think that their defense is what it once was. I mean, they're 2-1 and with a, -9 net points over the season. Granted, I mean, week 1, they only put up 10 points, I think, or whatever it was. So it's like they have 51 points over 2 weeks, which, is pretty good. But they honestly probably should have lost against, the Cardinals. The Cardinals definitely would have probably beat them if they have, D-Hop. And, I mean, they don't have limited weapons on the Cardinals. So I'm not really high on the Rams right now. The Rams, to me, it's just... I think that their defense, is still doing pretty good, but I wouldn't say it's even lights out anymore. I mean, I wouldn't say that Aaron Donald's not effective or anything, but yeah, the Rams, strange. So now we're down to the top 12, I guess. Let me think here, because there are, I mean, gosh, these top 12 are kind of, insane. I'm going to put the Vikings at 12. I think that the Vikings are good, and they've shown that they have multiple weapons. KJ Osborne, having some game-clinching stuff against the Lions. And then, I mean, you even have Thielen getting a touchdown. And, I mean, sometimes the Lions, were blanketing Jefferson in their last game. But the Vikings, I mean, they barely they barely came back in this game, to be honest with you. It was one of those. Sorry. It was one of those things to me that it's like, Goff didn't play an insane game. He had 41 throws, and then it's like Dalvin Cook, I feel like they should have leaned on him a bit more, was having a really good game. Even Madison, I liked, when he was playing, seemed to have a spark and did really well. So it's like, the running game for the Vikings, I feel like maybe should be leaned on a bit more. Even I don't even really know who Madison is, to be honest with you. I guess he's kind of a younger player, was drafted, a few years ago, but yeah, I don't think I've ever seen this guy, and he looked like, he's a stocky 5'11", 215, but yeah, he looked like a strong runner and that sort of thing. But kind of crazy that, Jefferson didn't have really that much of effect, and that KJ Osborne and Thielen were, the best, or the producers on this team. Even though Jefferson did get targeted, quite a bit, but I do know for a fact that it seems like, Kirk is one of those that he'll force throws, his favorite guy. And I guess who wouldn't force to Jefferson, but you have other weapons. And even KJ Osborne, I remember, had, a few good catches against the Packers week 1. And this guy's definitely proven that he should be on the field next to Thielen and Jefferson as their, the third best option. But then you have a guy like Dalvin Cook who's healthy, and seemed to be, I remember, in high spirits at training camp, saying that I guess even the team was revitalized after they, weren't under Zimmer anymore from last year. So it's probably uplifting to him that he gets rewarded for his patience, with the team, and that, he's got a chance to run and carry the team. And I do think that he's a very special back that does just about everything well. He can catch, he's elusive, he's not a weak runner. He's got good speed. Only thing you have to really worry about with Cook, I guess, is, injuries a little bit. But I guess overall with the Vikings, I guess the weak point about their team to me is that their defense really, they haven't given up much points, but they played the Packers, who just were, learning their offense, week 1 and just didn't do anything. And then week 2, they got absolutely smoked by the Eagles. And then this last week, they barely beat the Lions, who, the Lions honestly have probably one of the worst, defense in the league, but are putting up monster points and that sort of thing. So yeah, the Vikings to me, they definitely look like, against, legitimate teams, they still look like, Kirk doesn't do well to the challenge, and granted, I guess it was the Eagles who, seem very legit this year. But yeah, the Vikings, I think that they could be good. They just need to, I don't know what they're going to do with their defense. They just have a really young secondary. They don't really have that good of a pass rush. They got Danielle Hunter, and that's about it. But that's why I'm going to put the Vikings at 12. Moving on to number 11. So for 11, I think I'm going to put... the Giants at 11. It seems to me like with the Giants that they're running the ball pretty well with Saquon. I guess the most recent news that I've heard about them is that Kenny Golladay just isn't very happy. And I guess I wouldn't really know why, I guess. The team is winning. It seems like their defense isn't doing, terrible. But you're talking about a team, I guess, that's in one of the weaker divisions, and then they did just lose to Dallas, who I kind of said, I kind of said, like that sort of thing. But like Daniel Jones, I guess, having, a subpar performance, definitely not a good performance. And Saquon Jones, and I mean, gosh, Daniel Jones, I feel like needs to, put it together because it's like 9 rushes for 79 yards. If you aren't throwing picks and you're able to just run and convert all the time, and that sort of thing. But it's like, it just seems to me like with the team that they have, I mean, they have Sterling Shepard, who's, pretty good. And then you've got Kenny Galladay, who obviously is upset. I mean, 3 targets and he had no catches. So, I mean, maybe he's just mad with Daniel Jones like anybody should be with the inaccurate throws and whatever else. But it's like it's just one of those things that, to me, you got a pretty good defense, I guess. It seems like they're not, terrible, and it's good enough to keep them in games. Like they're not giving up, a ton of points, but the offense just needs to be consistent. And Daniel Jones, I think that's just his problem, is that he's never going to be consistent enough. Even though they have, all faith in him, he just isn't the guy. And I mean, they've got a good team. It's just, the QB play has to be consistent there. Because they don't have any guys on the team that are, I guess, bona fide, going to hard carry the team. Like, I mean, Saquon, he could get hurt. He's been hurt for however many years in a row. Kenny Galladay, if he wants out, I mean, that's instantly going to, put a heavy load on the rest of the wide receiver core that's very young and very inexperienced with not the best QB throwing to him. So I don't know, the Giants, I mean, some people are kind of high on them. I wouldn't say they're terrible, but it's like you need your offense to perform better if you're going to make it into the top 10, in my opinion. But I guess starting with the top 10, I want to put, looking at these teams and looking at all the top teams here, it's like not even all of them I think that are really that good or have been performing very well. But I guess with number 10, I'm going to put... With the Lions, I am actually going to put them at number 10. And I'm going to kind of explain to you guys why I think that they're number 10, even though they've been seemingly red hot on offense. The thing about the Lions that I've noticed is that they have some good defensive plays. And they've been very, very good on offense. Like, I think that their offensive unit, the only place where they could maybe improve a bit more, is obviously quarterback. And I mean, I'm not saying Goff is playing bad at all, but I feel like with Amon-Ra St. Brown, just proving that he's electric, he's a very good threat. He honestly reminds me of like a Percy Harvin. He's not as bruisery. He's quick. He's always getting open for short gains and then yards after the catch. And I remember when they use him in the same way, and I mean, it's not even the same head coach, but they use him in the same way that, Golden Tate was used when he was on this team, for a few years, when Stafford was still on the team. Amon-Ra St. Brown has kind of proved to be an X-Factor type player where, I mean, he's always going to be able to, chip and sometimes chunk for yards. And, I mean, even, Chark, and then even Reynolds, have just kind of, they blend in perfectly with that because they're two outside taller guys. And then you have DeAndre Swift, who's, emerged as a very good multifaceted tool where he can catch pretty well, but he's, a patient runner, good speed. And then you've got, Jamal Williams, who, is a very good goal line runner because of how strong he is, and he just doesn't cough the ball up. The problem that I have with the Lions, though, is that they've given up insane amount of points. And it's one of those things that it's like, 93 points in 3 games. So it's like, I know that week one, I mean, I know in week one that it was one of those things that they played the Eagles, and the Eagles, scored a bunch, and they also scored a bunch that game and barely lost. And it was kind of one of those, random games of week one that it's like, I mean, I considered the Eagles, kind of be a lock to win that game, and they weren't a lock, obviously, with the marginal error. But then the Lions also lost to the Vikings, who they let come back. And that's kind of the problem that I have, is that the defense just doesn't... It gives up way too many points. It's just... it's one of those things that, like, you can have the greatest offense, but if your defense literally can't make, a stop when they have to, I mean, you're just not going to win. You're just not going to win games. I'm sorry. Like, unless they're willing to give up a lot of points and then always make, a play or, do something at the end of the game, you're just, I mean, yeah, like I said, you're just not going to win a lot of games. And, I mean, that's why I'm putting the Lions at 10. Because, I mean, yeah, their offense is, so electric and doing so well. And, I mean, I think Campbell is coaching them really well, because I think that they're honestly, a year or two ahead of where they should be with who they've been drafting and what their record was even last year. Because they obviously got, Aiden Hutchinson with the number 2 overall pick. I mean, who would guess that, like, a year later, they, Amon-Ra would be in his second year, they'd still have Goff, and then they, you're still talking about how, all that fun stuff, I guess, with that sort of thing. But yeah, the Lions I'm ranking at 10. I mean, it's kind of where I'm at. I think that they are a top 10 team with how explosive they are, and it's one of those things that maybe if they can, somehow get ahead, which I just don't see them doing because of their defense. I don't know. There's just, their defense is holding them back. That's all you need to know about the Lions. But moving on from that, I want to put the Ravens next. And I guess the thing with me with the Ravens is that they're banged up at running back again. And I mean, they've got, Lamar Jackson, who's, playing really well, makes effortless flicks, and I mean, gets touchdowns off of it pretty effortlessly. But then the other thing about them is that they have, I mean, way better QB play than the Lions, obviously. But it seems like their offense isn't operating as, good as it should. And I mean, the defense is playing well. But they did give up a 21-point lead, against the Dolphins, because they just, I don't know if it's because they switched to zone. Maybe the switch to zone just wasn't good for them, But it seems to me like the offense, is operating how it should in terms of like the passing game. Like Mark Andrews, is doing well on the Ravens, and I mean, but overall, I think for them, it's really one of those things that they can lean on Lamar, obviously, but they need to figure out this defense thing, because it seems like the offense is putting up points and they're able to convert their downs. I mean, they have, so many weapons and people that are able to, convert. And Bateman's finally emerging as like a legitimate wide receiver who, can go deep or, go low, and multifaceted guy. But they just, it's one of those bizarre things that I think their defense just can't make these mistakes. And I mean, even this past week, I mean, Bills versus Dolphins, obviously the Bills defense is way better than, the Ravens is, but the Ravens didn't give up, or I mean, the Bills didn't give up 3 touchdowns the whole game. So I mean, it's just going to show that the Dolphins offense just isn't going to score at will, I guess. But moving on from the Ravens to number 8. Here, give me a second. I really want to get, I guess, the remainder teams that we don't have on here. So we don't have the Dolphins. We don't have the Eagles. We don't have the Bills. We don't have the Browns yet. We don't have Chiefs. Chiefs. Jaguars. One, two, three, four, five, six. Who else do we not have? Oh, the Buccaneers. I'm totally... Bears, Panthers, Saints, Raiders, Commanders, Titans, Colts, Niners, Chargers, Bengals, Broncos, Cowboys, Cardinals, Rams, Vikings, Giants, Lions, Ravens. Who did I forget about? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Oh, Packers. What am I? Didn't even include my team on here. So with these remaining teams, I mean, we're looking at, number 8. I think amongst all of these teams, to be honest with you, we're looking at probably the Browns. I mean, honestly, at number 8. I like that the Browns are now leaning more on their run game, and that Chubb, is finally getting the respect he deserves in terms from the coaching staff to, run and take control of the games. But then the other thing that I guess I'll give them is that Brissett, while he's not, obviously their guy because of the Watson suspension, he has been making the throws that he needs to get these guys their yards, their production. And even this last week, David Njoku finally came alive where he had, a career day. And I mean, I've been saying this, that I mean, if they want to have, a well-balanced offense, that they need... Amari Cooper's been doing well since he's been there. And, seemingly has really good route running still and good hands and, decent speed. But David Njoku has to be, one of their guys because they don't have, Landry anymore. And they don't have too many passing weapons, in my opinion. But it's like they don't really need too many because they have, Chubb and then Hunt as their, running back tandem. And I mean, Hunt, I guess, has been kind of forgotten about. I think, to be honest with you, at this point, if I were to make a speculation, he may honestly, be on the trade block because he deserves to be a starter somewhere. And I mean, they might try to get something for him, before the deadline. Which, I mean, could become in the, form of a wide receiver or something, or because I really feel like they don't have that many wide receiver threats on Cleveland besides Cooper and Njoku, if Njoku stays consistent. I guess the major problem I have with the Browns, though, at this point is that it seems like Myles Garrett is, I wouldn't say taking the year off, but it's like his sack count I don't think is very high. Let me find, I guess. Oh, and there it is right here. Some people say that it's one of those things that, and I mean, I guess Kareem Hunt did pretty well this game. And I mean, I do know that, the game was run through the run. But yeah, looking at this, like, they just don't really have anybody besides Cooper that's consistent, and then now Njoku with the one game. And I mean, Kareem Hunt, obviously some, chip yards, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, I feel like, has to be kind of one of those guys to step up to be the third wide receiver threat because he's, young. He's only a year into the league. or 2 years, and I mean they just don't really have anybody else. But I mean, who knows what their record is going to be come. Who knows what their record is going to be? Once Watson comes back. But being at 2-1 is good for them. They lost that game against the Jets, which was kind of, I wouldn't say a fluke because they definitely blew that game, but they definitely are putting up enough points. The defense is playing all right, but this team can definitely get better. I think that their defense can definitely get better, but it's just one of those things that I think their defense really does need to, start performing. And so we moved to number 7 here, and I would actually like to put the I'd like to put the Packers at number 7. The only reason I'm not putting, the Bucks, lower than the Packers, and I mean, this isn't based off a record or anything like that, but the reason why the Packers are here is mainly because the offense still hasn't, completely found itself. Romeo Doubs had his career day on Sunday, where, I mean, he had, a good amount of catches, not an insane amount of yards, but, I mean, really showed his hustle, his route running, his run after catch is really good, and just how overall, like, a pretty polished player he is, even though he's a rookie. He definitely doesn't look like a rookie to me. And, the thing about it is with the Packers, I guess, is they've really kind of showed that without Watson, they can't really run these fake jet sweeps or anything because he's the speedster of the team. And I mean, I guess I don't even know if they would do this with Watkins, but Watkins is the other speedster, or is supposed to be somewhat of a deep threat, and he's obviously on injured reserve, serving that for at least 3 more games. But the run game struggled when, obviously, against the Bears. That was a really strong point against the Bears, is that Aaron Jones was just lighting them up all game. And while A.J. Dillon hasn't really gotten going, he's having, some good carries, but overall, kind of quiet, compared to last year. But it is a new offense, and teams, I think, are worrying less about the pass with the Packers because right now the Packers are a run first team. And I mean, but the reason I'm ranking the Packers this high is because their defense has been playing, lights out, opportunistic football. And I mean, even this last weekend, it's like, Jair exits after the first play of on defense because he tweaked a groin. And while it's not supposed to be long term, I think that they really did hold up very well. And I mean, even the emergence of Keyshawn Nixon, has kind of just shown that the Packers probably have, better depth at corner than they did last year with a player that, came in and definitely stepped up to the plate. But and then you even have Quay Walker, who, I mean, week 1 the Vikings kind of picked on him, but he's been playing better and better. And it just seems like everybody, on the defense is, contributing in a way. The pass rush definitely, I think, could get better. Like, I don't think that Gary's doing well, but he's not getting, the sacks I would want him to. But overall, I think the defense is performing at, such a high level. Even though the, Buccaneers were without Evans, Godwin, and that sort of thing. But it's like they proved that they were able to, defend and, play tough and be very, very hard to score on. And I think, I mean, one of the, and then the thing about it is that, Brady sounded really confident, going into the game when they talked about him. And he's like, oh, I've played with guys like Beasley my whole life. It's like I was throwing to him for the third, whatever they said. And I mean, you're up against Tom Brady, one of the greats in the league. And I mean, they were able to beat that team and score pretty well at will the first two drives, and then not the rest of the game. But being able to hold the Buccaneers to that few points, I mean, I think that the Packers, the offense is only going to get better. And it was also, David Bakhtiari's first game back where he had limited snaps, and they were subbing him out with Yash or Yaman. And overall, I'm pretty happy, I guess, where the Packers are at this point, as a fan. And I think it can only get better as they, learn more about how to run the offense, because the defense is definitely, I mean, one of the better ones in the league at this point. But moving on, the next team I'm going to put here is I am going to put the Buccaneers. I am going to put the Buccaneers here because overall, I think that, I mean, if the Packers, even with the game that they played, I don't think that if you have Evans or Godwin in that game, I think it's a different game. I think that the Packers, would probably end up coming short, because I don't think that with Jair out, and it's not like he follows anybody or anything, but I don't think that, I mean, I don't think that they would hold them to that few of points. And I mean, I think that the Packers would, need at least 21 to be able to win, in a game like that, because they definitely had where, the Buccaneers were banged up and Mike Evans' suspension, but they did really well against the run. I mean, probably better, would do better just because there's no wide receiver threat, or, not any major wide receiver threats, on the field and that sort of thing. But I think that and I think that the defense kind of proved that they can adapt and really kind of overcome, adversity with how they played, lights out on the Packers in this after the first two drives. But that's why the Buccaneers are at 6. But I also do think that, I mean, their line has been banged up. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that it's not surefire with the Buccaneers. I mean, I don't think anything's surefire this year. But moving on to the next team that I think, that I'm going to put here is I'm going to put the Chiefs. I'm actually going to put the Chiefs here. The Chiefs, honestly, and I mean, these last few three, I mean, you could honestly put them anyway. But the Chiefs, putting them here, it's mostly because, I mean, they had such an electric week 1. And, I mean, they won handsomely. And then, I mean, you have, the second week where they win. And then this last week, they just kind of, they stutter. The Chiefs stutter to where, they... Why can't I find the Chiefs? Oh, they're right here. And I think that this offense, they've put up 88 points, a good clip, and only allowed 65. I think the defense is playing pretty well. But overall, the Chiefs, to me, I guess Mahomes kind of forced it. Didn't play as well as, you would kind of expect him to. And, I mean, the past few years, it has been one of those things that, to me, that there's, there was a stat line for... There was a stat line for Mahomes that he had like the most drop passes of any quarterback in the league, where, I mean, he could have thrown that. So it's like maybe that's one of those things that's, it's coming back to haunt him finally, that he's, being a little bit, he's definitely like a gunslinger, has a rocket of an arm, that sort of thing. And he makes, good throws. And I'm not saying he's bad, but it's one of those things that maybe this year he throws, a few more picks. And it seems like, with the team and the growing pains, that even Juju's had, a couple fumbles. And the team just isn't playing, as clean of football as, I would like. And turnovers are just such a huge stat that you don't really want to be... You don't really want to be, giving them up. and do having turnovers like that, because come playoff time, those really hurt you against good teams, and it's what makes the difference usually between going to the next round or getting eliminated. So the Chiefs I'm putting here because they just haven't been as clean as I would like with the ball. But for number 4, I am going to put the Jaguars. The Jaguars, the thing that I'll say about them is that it's like, maybe people could say that I'm placing them rather high. I could be. I could be placing them, really high and that sort of thing, because they are 2-1. You could definitely, there's a lot, I guess there's a good amount of 2-1 teams. But, there was there were some of these that were definitely, pretty low down as well. But the Jaguars, to me, their defense has been playing, really well. And then their offense has been, obviously playing really well. And I think that they finally, are utilizing Lawrence to his skill set, and he's evolving, and he's able to play, he's finally able to play at the level that he needs to within a system that's not going to hinder him from a coach that was just, not a good coach last year. And they beat, the Chargers, and the Chargers were definitely one of those teams that it's like, you wouldn't think that they would get crushed this bad. If this was 2 weeks ago, I would say the Jaguars are like up and coming, because beating the Colts and shutting them out week 2 for their first win, it kind of, maybe could be an outlier, but then them really punishing the the Chargers, who are banged up, but, are still a pretty good team. It just doesn't really, make me think that, this team is bad. And they have, they're not just doing it with, one guy. They've got, a multifaceted receiving core, with Marvin Jones, honestly, probably who I would think would be the best on this team. But you've got guys like Zay Jones, who's, never really performed that much in his career, doing, wonderful things, but having a very balanced offensive attack. And I think that's, something that's going to suit Lawrence, because, he's going to read the field very well. He's a big guy. He's able to run. He's able to do some things, but also their run game is just very good. Against a team that it's like should have a pretty stout run defense with the likes of Derwin James, Khalil Mack, Bosa, and just an overall pretty good defense on, the Chargers that got better in the offseason. But yeah, the Jaguars, to me, before the season, people were talking about them being kind of a dark horse. And I was one of those that I'll believe it when I see it type of people, but they've really outperformed, and I think that they will continue to perform in the year. And if their defense, keeps playing like this, I wouldn't be surprised if, they're like, even possibly, gosh, the AFC is steep with talent, but they could very easily be, a 2 or a 3 seed. I don't think that they could overthrow a team like the Bills, who are, in my opinion, at least at this point, even with their loss withstanding, are the best team in the AFC. But, yeah, the Jaguars, I think, are legit this year. And their defense is also backing it up, and their offense, Lawrence is running a finely tuned machine, to be honest. And now for number 3. People might hate me for this if they see this. I am actually going to put the Dolphins here. I know that some people are really high on the Dolphins, saying that they're one of the best teams. But to me, it's one of those things that when your offense, stutters, and then you win a game kind of based off of another player's error rather than your own ability, it kind of, to me, it goes against their skill. They obviously played the Bills, 2 of the top teams, one of the games to watch this weekend to see if the Dolphins were really legit, because they had that insane comeback against the Ravens the week before. But to me, the Dolphins are too, how do we say it? Like sporadic. So, I mean, if you have one week where you're able to, kind of score at will and do some crazy things, but then the next week, I mean, you're barely winning and they barely, scored, against the Bills. I think it's one of those that it's like, it just shows other teams that you're able to be stopped, and obviously Tua only threw it 18 times for 186 yards. And I mean, he was, sacked, quite a bit. But, you got Allen who's throwing, 63 balls for 400 yards. That's the other thing with them is that they're able to put up, mad points, and they have a really good tandem and a really good offense. But their defense just isn't that good. And I mean, this is one of those games that obviously Tyreek Hill, didn't do that much. Jalen Waddle, yeah, he had one really fat game, and then he had three, other targets for around, just over 50 yards off of 6 targets. But it's one of those things that if your team is this sporadic, then I mean, come playoff time, you really are looking for consistency. And while Buffalo lost, they've shown a lot more consistency to be able to, compete in close games. And then I think that one missed throw from Allen is like the only one he's going to throw this year. Like that's just not, something that he misses. And especially in a game where, he threw for 400 yards. But, that leads me to obviously the next team here. I'm going to put the Bills at number 2. The Bills, to me, have kind of proven they had that strong showing week 1. They had, the week 2 where they won they lost. They won. And then week 3, they obviously meet their first defeat at Miami, who is now undefeated. And while Miami's undefeated, I don't think that it's one of those things to sing home about because, like I said, that their defense is just very, is giving up, a good amount of points, I'm pretty sure, with the Dolphins. I mean, I guess 64, but, it seems like they just don't really have too much of, leaders on defense, in my opinion. And it's like if you can't, cover a guy like Allen who's mobile or a guy from Lamar Jackson that's mobile, teams, I mean, a lot of the top guys, are mobile in the league nowadays. And it's like if that's all it takes to, carve you up, it's just one of those things that it's like Allen, he makes that throw 99 out of 100 times. But the Bills, even with the loss of Micah Hyde, I definitely think that you're talking about a team with, a potential MVP candidate. And I don't know why this is doing this now, but you're talking about a team, with a potential MVP candidate and a really good quarterback. And so the Bills, I mean, to me are like, a top team in today's league because they got a strong running quarterback, a really good wide receiver, in Diggs, pretty good tight end, some other good wide receiver options, and Allen just makes all of those players better. And moving to number 1, I don't know if this would be a surprise to anybody, but I am putting the Eagles on top of my power rankings. And this is because they seem to have all the pieces coming together all at once. Jalen Hurts is playing out of his mind. I wouldn't have believed you if you told me that, Hurts was going to have an MVP-like year where he would just utterly dominate the first few weeks. And, and that sort of thing. But you're really getting, what you want out of Hurts. He's mobile, he's strong, he's making accurate throws. His receivers all trust him. Devontae Smith had, his insane game on Sunday. And then you also have Brown, who, just kind of proved that he's obviously right at home with Hurts, who he played with in college, and it's just one of those things that, to me, the Eagles are just playing at a really high clip. And I mean, even their defense, has proven with like Darius Slay and some other players, and then Fletcher Cox, that they have all that they need in order to win. I mean, going for 340 yards just off of 22 attempts is pretty crazy for Hurts. And I mean, his completion percentage isn't anything to sing home about, but he's making these big throws when they matters, and he trusts his team. The only thing that I see, I guess, with this team is that they don't really have. I mean, they have Miles Sanders, who's a pretty serviceable back, but maybe they should run it a bit more. But yeah, like I said, Devonta Smith with a huge game. A.J. Brown, doing really well. And then Dallas Goddard, to me is just, one of those tight ends that's always a pain because he's a really good, converter on third and shorts, being a big guy. And it just seems to me like, the only... that they can just be a really good team and hard to deal with, and I guess they had a fumble, but they recovered both, and like I said, I mean, they have a very good defense. I think Vontae Maddox, the corner, is a very good slot young corner. You got obviously Fletcher Cox, who's just a beast, still, destroying the interior O-line and being really good against the run. Sweat, I think, is just, I mean, honestly, a freak. I really like this guy. He's just always performed. And, to me, over his career, I mean, he's just gotten better and better. I mean, last year, I guess he had a down year and that sort of thing, but he's just one of those players that's very physical, very fast, and very strong. And, will probably just continue to get better, probably. Being that he's still only 25, and he's been in the league for, 5 years. This is his fifth year. So, I mean, you're just talking about a very well-oiled machine where that's led by, Hurts, who's very mobile, very strong, and they just have so many ways to attack you. So that's why I'm putting the Eagles at number 1. And this is my power rankings. So yeah, that's comment on it. Tell me what you think if you really want to. But otherwise, that's it for that, and we're gonna move on to our next segment.